You will excuse me if I will start from far. The first part of my talk will address concepts that seem abstract and detached from our direct interest, but in this case is painting. But the promise is that we're going to come back to that in the second part of the talk, hopefully having a more meaningful and deep understanding of the emancipatory claim of the project that I will introduce to your attention. The first part is without images, so it's no Instagram, and will run approximately 30 minutes. And after that, I selected 4 projects, but in one way or another represent different approaches to the question of autonomy of art, value of usership, and I will say way to express freedom. After that, we're going to have space for some questions, if you like. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Kantian claims of autonomy of art. The real big problem for Kant was how to emancipate the individual from a context that was fully permeated by the presence of a social class that in the name of God was taking over, having a full control on the action of the single individual. The research of autonomy, or to call it like did Pierre Bourdieu, the conquest of space, was the Enlightenment promise to allow finally the man to describe new rules and form of judgment, and so move forward from a situation marked by a fully symbolized society but was not allowing the free use of things, because everything was controlled by the sacred. And sacred means separated from the use. The use in the sacred realm was intended and was defined by the ritual that is controlled by the myth. The myth, as Emile Benveniste pointed out, provided the story. The ritual provided the action, guaranteeing and completing so the symbolism. So myth and rite, story and action. The symbolic at its own time in the life of a collectivity, and that has been mostly related to the cycle of the season during agriculture, but used to provide a structure for the language on which the man handled things, creating meaningful gesture. The use of things, their manipulation and observation, was the base of any understanding. Representation actually came from that, but on the contrary, is the result of a separation. Things before was interpreted and collapsed together, and later on slowly separated, analyzed, and so represented. So we can say that we lost unity. The history of Western society, from a certain point, is a history of the decay of this unity, or to say in other terms, the disenchanted world is a world experienced on an unsymbolized term. We are experiencing the fragmentation all over, from scientific specialization to the various forms of autonomy. And art is one of that realm, but the process of unsymbolization has produced initially as a form of emancipation from previous form of hierarchy. Sacred has been delegitimated by the so-called death of God, and the modernity can be seen as the sad, as the appearance of the natural world as a pure instinct. Repetition compulsion in the belief, in the financial calculation, are neurotic practice inscribed into an unsymbolized perspective. What remains now is the capital, only the capital. The question in our time is how can an artist define his power in a society that substitutes the old god with a new one? We can say is money. I mean, try to remove the word money to our time, and you will realize immediately that you can do that. So the questions are, I would say, are we as artists fully controlled by the market, or we can define strategy of emancipation? Can we, inside the system, explore or regain a space of action and criticality? What can be freedom nowadays? What can I desire? I will say that we have to choose between alienation or profanation. So if alienation, as a result of this repetition compulsion, is legitimizing and perpetuating separation, profanation, on the contrary, is action that brings back to the user what has been separated. The use of profanation is a strategy to dismantle, or at least attack, alienatory strategy of value of exchange by introducing the value of use. Profanation so reintroduces life into the norm. Usership as a possibility that we have to redeem the object, returning it to the unexpressed, breaking the norm and liberating it from the conventionality of language. Usership became a transdisciplinary, or to better say, a post-autonomy strategy to break preset order, withdraw experiences and field of action, functioning so as a new barbaric force to imagine the future of contemporary museums, but as we know, at the place of separation and conservation. Since profanation is a moving force propelled by a desire for life, but aimed to reach satisfaction, destroying, breaking, a limiting norm, interesting enough, this field of action admits in its use deformation, distortion, clumsiness, but as Agamben points out in his very interesting essay on profanation, are classical figure of the unsatisfied desire. So the game field is playfulness. Emile Benveniste again clarified how the game is somehow the opposite of the sacred. So game sacred, since it's able to break the unity existing between the ritual, the story, and the myth, with the mise-en-scène. Agamben's essay on profanation show how, as game of action or as game of word, playfulness lets survive only one part, liberating the other. And this liberation is emancipatory, since usership became a possibility apart from consumption, reactivating the norm, so the dispositive of power, liberating life, giving back to the user the space that the jurisdiction has confiscated. So we can say it's a game of life. I mean, look at, for example, at this phone. It can be perceived as a phone, or it can become a weapon, if I throw it to you, or it can be indecisive. That means that it can reveal all the amount of work and experiences that made this phone object of my understanding and my experience. So all of a sudden you can open up a phenomenology, a story about it. So to say that the value of language can be perceived or in its logic term, so the phone is a phone, or like second Wittgenstein would say, the value of language is in its context of use. So playfulness of word in search of a new and more authentic and deep understanding. I would say that it's time for a change, because the historical cycle of Neolithic civilization, so agriculture, has begun to shift its course, entering the downward arc of its parabola. At this juncture, our folks might travel back to dwell on the instinctual world, the culture of the eye and hand, of seeing and picturing, that belonged to Paleolithic anthropology. We move like amoebas through an inorganic space. We are characterized by an absence of boundaries, mutability of form, and capacity to create outgrowth that split off from the original nucleus. As a radical force, we are mobile, transgender, expansive, flexible entities that can fluctuate and break apart, merge together and flow for other. Globalization has led us to an hybridization of traits that resemble mineral pseudomorphoses, so form containing another form, like crystal, for example, but have to begin to corrode the seemingly stable structure of the imperial design in an entropic process. We can say that life somehow is post-growth. So the lecture intends to investigate painting as an institution in which the medium takes distance from the 19th century notion of autonomy, moving into a reconquest of space, I would say, of action and speculation that expands the network in which the visual artifact operates. Painting became a site of distribution and display, that intend to re-engage the disinterested spectatorship, challenging model of presentation devices, discussing authorship, hybridizing formats and identity, working on memory, connecting spaces and experiences. Painting became a site for presentation and discourse that intend to question preset notion of capital paradigm, introducing usership towards possession, mobility towards settlement, the inclusion of the author, as we will see later, so a reflection not only on the author but also on the copyright. A lateral position, I would say, that intend to create a community of interest against a political representation. Painting as a site for an archaeology of traces, an investigation on the sign of a work, introducing memory and knowledge, moving the direction of the hunter phrase, respect the one of the capital farmer. Representation became a place for presentation. In some of the examples I will show you later, you will see how the trompe-l'œil, that is used in one-to-one scale, is activating theater and guaranteeing so performativity and action. Imagination, so, not as a tool, not as simply a metaphor, but as a tool. Imagination as a coin to guarantee a space of barbaric action in which the attempt is to separate life from the realm of jurisdiction. Real estate, in secondo stile, one of the projects that I will show you later, became a medium. So hybridization against purity, or to come back to the figure of the artist hunter-gatherer, masquerade as opportunity to intrude unnoticed. The identity of the shape became transgender and expansive, metiche and post-colonial, by altering the function of the work to explore new territories. Painting so became a gallery, a magazine, a recreative space, a theater. Painting is a nominal power in the hand of the artist, but so regained contractual power, not being only pure decoration. So confusion, of course. The artist became curator, editor, writer, critic. So curatorial practices and exhibition design are a strategy to investigate and operate in the object in direction of operating structural alteration, so morphological change, and the consequences of the change, so clinical manifestation of the work, are strategy to implement usership. In my practice, as you can see by the institutional criticism, critique, we take the knowledge of the action space without stopping to the pure criticism. Or from the Transavanguardia, which is Italian movement from the 80s, the taste for overrunning, the expressiveness and the mythology. So a reactivation of archaeology as a stratigraphic research and possibility that aim to animism as a response to materialism. By arte povera, we resume the relational data, territoriality as a space, condition and limit, the expanded field, vitality, flexibility and spirit of adaptation. By minimalism, the security of the art of the origin, so the rigorous form in relation to the body of the viewer. The projects that I selected are four, and I will give a brief introduction to each project, but I will try to focus on specific aspects of each one, in order so to show you how painting it became all of a sudden a possibility to include the author and to redefine also its own limits. The first project is titled Art of Conversation, and is an exhibition that has been hosted at the PSN Gallery in Berlin, 2012. The first sample of this kind of practice are dated 2010-11, but somehow I felt that in this project I reached certain conclusions. And the The project is what I call an exhibition painting. Means I all of a sudden embodied the curator, became the curator, and I act as a curator in relation to the surface of painting, creating an exhibition. I started inviting certain artists. I decided as well to include another co-curator for this project. And we started to make studio visits, travel, and I will briefly give you at least an idea of what happened, about the process on which we go through. And we were very interested in this interesting meeting that happened between Einstein and Tagore, the poet, close to Berlin, in Kaput, the summer house of Einstein. It was a pretty strange meeting because, of course, for Einstein, the world was pure determinism, so objectivity. You can do nothing, but you have to somehow accept certain determinism. Where for Tagore, the world was the result of a praxis. In Germany, we would say it was a Gegenstand. It means that any object was the result of certain use and certain possible emancipation that you can reach through that use. So it was for pure subjectivity a revolution. The encounter between them didn't work out, and ideally we thought to restage this possible meeting, going to Bangladesh, where Tagore became a very important figure for the Bangladesh screen in the 70s, and imaging to have an exhibition to happen there. Where in Bangladesh, where in front of the Louis Kahn Assembly building, the parliament, built up by Louis Kahn. And so Andreas Schlegel took a flight, went to Bangladesh, and we started to make studio visits in order to understand which artists we could invite to the show. We discovered an amazing artist who was Nael Wamien, who is now having very big success, but at the time was a bit less known. And he just finished to work on an amazing video that was titled United Red Army. And he accepted to participate on the exhibition. So he gave us the first frame of his new film. And the point was, okay, where to stage the exhibition? We needed to image a pavilion. And so we decided to reconstruct a portion of the summer house of Einstein, that you can see in this picture, in front of the Bangladesh pavilion, the Bangladesh building of Vietnam. So here you see the interior of the room, how we was when we went there to make this. This was also the location for the exhibition. As you can see, this kind of building is surrounded by water. That is something we'll come back later on the next part. And this is the image of the first public image of the movie made by Nael Wamien. The point was, okay, where we can project this movie. We didn't want simply to use imaginary world, but in order to activate this conversation, we had to select the pieces that was recalling each other. So Italian artist Riccardo Previdi became known in the last year for this display systems that are called tatami, that are basically structures that are used in order to project on it film or we thought, why not, also video from other artists. Here is an example of a show of Riccardo in 2010, where on this tatami was projected a movie. And as you can see, it's interesting because the live GoPro is sort of display system, breaking the images and spreading the images on the environment. So we commissioned to Riccardo a new tatami, especially for the occasion. So we accepted the invitation and we started to make all the sketches and the project to make possible to realize this new display system. This at the time is called the Oscar II Max Bill. And as you can see, he gave me all the info that I needed in order to produce this piece. So it was also this long discussion and conversation with Ricardo to reach the final point. And here you see the result. This painting is pretty big because it's limited 50 for 2 meters, something. As you can see, inside this pavilion with the construction the summer house of Iceland, you can see the tatami of Ricardo, which projected on it a frame by Nemo Mien. The other artists are Oscar Tuaton, who as you can see connected to this title of the piece of Ricardo, and so moving forward we have this Lawler, René Magritte. But the interesting point that I want to call your attention is the fact that the work of Ricardo, present inside this exhibition painting, is not a copy, because it doesn't exist the original. It is a work that is appearing only inside this context, this exhibition, and you can separate it from that. It's like if we both renounce to the possession, maintaining the use of the work. And all of a sudden, for me, it was interesting how painting was allowing this space of action, it was creating discussion and also commissioning and producing new artwork. Here you see some installation views. The gallery was empty. We invited Matthew and Pezzo, an American artist, Berlin Day, to create the exhibition design of the show. We decided to pour 10 tons of cement inside the gallery, and we created floating water, like the Litan Pavilion. PSM gallery, the old gallery. And on the back of the canvas, you could see the Art of Conversation, is the title of the piece, curated by Andrea Schlegel and Paolo Chiasera, and the featured walls, so the complete recognition of each piece was taking part of this exhibition painting. The main claim is that an exhibition is first and foremost an image in the mind, so something that has a certain permanence, and so you can translate this content in various terms. At that time, now we are pretty used to consider this possibility. But I promise you that when this first experiment here, it was a pretty new territory to investigate. So I was feeling that I was pushing certain borders, and the territory was a bit an unknown one. That was also interesting because all of a sudden, this unexpressed space was giving me the possibility to decide certain rule and create a work that was a real research and not only a pure illustration of an idea. I had all of a sudden to confront on certain questions, how I can produce this work, how I can refer to that. And of course, all the artists who took part of the show put this exhibition inside their city. So, if you think the show as a curator, we had all the word of life, the Lebenswelt around the exhibition. We travel, we discuss, we create a scheme for the show, we produce the exhibition, but everything was in this sort of painting-based representation. So use against possession, I would say, for this piece. The second project that I would like to introduce you which the water is because we can assembly building is surrounded by water. So somehow we try to create situation in which the painting was the only meaningful presence, but another artist was able to create the exhibition design, changing also the way in which your body was activated towards the painting. Of course, the painting was mirroring on the water, creating this sort of fragmented image. You had to treat the painting in a sort of before seeing from distance, after without getting wet, getting close. It was a different way to activate the body inside the space, instead of that simply hanging this piece on the wall. And so painting there became a space where I and Andreas create an exhibition. And all of a sudden I realized that there was some unexpressed potential. I liked a lot the idea to be somehow a space. And so in occasion of an exhibition, a biennale from the north in Norway, that I've been invited, I decided to completely open my practice to the other. I invited the previous director of the Momentum Biennale to consider to produce an exhibition inside my space. It was a series of small canvases. The previous director was Marianne Zamesnik, and as well I invited Elena Sofri, who is founder of Signal in Malmo, an amazing non-profit space dedicated to various forms of exhibition design and research. And I invited them so to create an exhibition who could appear inside my painting. At that point I was not anymore the curator, I was just really the producer somehow. My problem was enter in empathy with them and understand how to realize in the better way their idea. And the exhibition was called Choreographer Pages, Rosa Tannenzappen. And for me it was a way again to somehow open up the narration of the preceding Biennale, bringing a person who was a peculiar figure of that edition and giving through painting the possibility to her to rediscuss and renegotiate a relation with the institution. What happened is that they was really interested on two things. One thing is feminist culture. And the amazing thing is that this interest for feminist culture didn't come from certain political claim from the 16th century, but it was having the roots in a much more deeper understanding, who is the one of the population who was living in the Mediterranean before the Proto-European invasion. So we are talking about the late Paleolithic, beginning of Neolithic time. It was this population that has been studied by a Lithuanian archaeologist, Maria Gimbuta, who gave a meaningful account on all the signs and the way in which this population was matrilinear, defined as a relation with expressivity and with religion, and so on and so forth. She collects a series of what she called scripts, with a table with a collection of classification of signs, who was all of course sign who was related to the culture of the goddess, and who somehow represent the first way, or the first track that we have on human expressiveness, because here we are talking really at the beginning of Homo sapiens. And so we had this interesting amount of information, and all of a sudden they were interested as well in the work of Dirk Doctor, who is a Finnish artist. And she worked on a list of the most, where she tried to fill up with all the most old vegetables that are still in cultivation. And among that there is these potatoes, the Rosa Tannenzappen. It's a pretty interesting one because it's very small, so somehow basically not anymore in production because it's not able to produce capital. But at the same time, it's cultivated by few persons here and there, and it's somehow winning certain price as a bio-exclusive sort of food. But somehow, at the same time, this potato is disappearing, like the old leaves of the goddess, or all this sign of expressiveness. We are surrounded by signs, but we are not able to recognize. I give an example. The protection around the field are created crossing line, and this was a sign of water in that old Neolithic culture. Something that we are seeing around as well, but we never refer to this meaningful aspect of our environment. And they noted that these potatoes, with the most ancient potatoes we have, probably, is resembling the figurine of the goddess studied by Maria di Buddha. So what they did, they ordered 4 kilo potatoes by this British farmer, and they started to select one, but more than the other was matching with the script defined by Maria di Buddha. And at that point, when they found the right one, they sent it to me, and I have to report these potatoes 13 times in order to study all the signs of these potatoes moving so in the direction of this animistic vegetable. And this was, I think, pretty interesting because it was a way, again, the potato was not only a potato but was also something else. In the context of youth was allowing the potato to become an idol. And what was happening there? Well, if you think what happened is that we operate somehow on his DNA. Or a way to hybridize the object is operating his DNA. So the DNA of the object are the categories, I would say. Like Victor Frankenstein, the art producer can instigate and grow usership qualities into the life of the object, giving him subjective qualities. Elements but for their social qualities function as a sign instead of an interpreter. The DNA of the object is pimped, allowing so the object to grow and expand its sphere of influence in the social practice, reaching the level of the Frankenstein, but his own, but he has his own life and adventure. So work on the DNA of the object means work on the sign of the object. So study an object means operate a stratigraphy of its sign, allowing the porosity, so the in and out qualities of the object, of the surface, to have an animistic outcome. All of a sudden, I was not handling a potato. For me, what was an idol was a goddess, and I had to paint it in front of me, considering all this interpretation that was inside the essence of these potatoes, since the sign of the potatoes was allowing this possible relationship. Think about what something is coming from the earth. Is, of course, as mythical possibility of understanding. So you can see how, for example, all of a sudden, small sign was allowing to imagine faces. It was like a sculpture that I painted 13 times. 13 times I was just coming from the fact that I started to move the potatoes slowly, and when I reached the complete round, it was 13 times. So this is an exhibition called Choreography Spaces of Simon Dustin, and is curated by Madame Zanetti and Elena Scotty. And all of a sudden, I realized, okay, I can really be a space. And that creates a big changement, because all of a sudden, a bit like Don Quixote, I decide to open my own exhibition space. In a very honest way, I thought, okay, if I have to run a gallery all of a sudden, I will probably have the money just to rent a room in Betis, I guess. We'll have probably a packed up linoleum, we will have the walls a bit pressure, and so on and so forth. And so, I took a very honest account of what was my possibility, but instead of renting the room, and so to enter in this bureaucratical world, I decided to colonize the imaginary in my own space as a painting. So this canvas is 3 meters by 4, and I started to organize the exhibition inside the canvas. As you can see here, there is Dionysus. Dionysus is the symbol of my faith, called Stile. That is a nomadic, canvas-based, artisan exhibition space. And Dionysus is needed here to be possible to hang this list with all the exhibition that has been hosted inside my space. So as you can see, I hanged directly original artwork from other artists on my canvas, creating an exhibition, creating an opening, inviting another artist or a curator to write a text, choosing the best location for the exhibition, because of course, thanks to this nomadic quality, the canvas will be folded and bring it in the best place. I always say that not only context is everything, but as well a canvas space travels faster than a building. So for me, the point was all the time reach the best spot to present the work of the artist I was inviting. We started to create an exhibition in Berlin initially. We made like 13 shows. I started to open more than one space, so I had already started 3, 4 spaces around, and I started to appoint temporary directors to create a program on their own. There was, this was the presentation design, so the sudden made me understand that I have to remove the stretcher bar, fold the canvas, put it in a bag, and give it to Jimmy and say, okay, go and organize the program for the next year. And that all of a sudden creates the painting having a memory that was bigger than me as a producer. Because of course, all traces, all the story that the canvas had when it was coming back in my head after a certain period of time was extremely fascinating. And what I will show you in this case is so an idea of usership as an embodiment. And I say that because here it's clear that the painting is functioning as an institution, so as an exhibition space, but as well can become the platform to discuss what an exhibition space or an institution is. So the last episode of this great adventure, like Don Quixote would say, has been in Portugal, at Funchal in Lisbon, where the space has been sent to the Funchal in Lisbon guys, but they made an account of their idea of institution using my exhibition space as a platform to make discussion. It's a 10-minute video. I think we can listen all because it's a video.
What is an institution for you? What are other institutions or models that you look at or that inform your practice?
We think of institutions at large, not only art institutions, always in terms of the act of instituting. In that sense, institutions are social and therefore fundamentally subjective protocols, sets of rules that prescribe and normalize not only behavior but also, and maybe more importantly, perception. We don't have any defined model of institution that informs our practice. By calling ourselves a Kunsthalle, we are obviously referring to a very specific institutional format, but that is more of a rhetorical device than an actual one. The way we chose to inhabit the institutional, in the beginning, was connected to the expansion, ad absurdum, of the format of the Kunsthalle, to the point where it was obvious that the art institution was a social construction, as opposed to a natural or naturalized entity. But instead of institutions or models, we would like to mention some ideas and concepts that have informed the way we have constructed and transformed Kunsthalle Lisbon. Fraser's mantra, the institution is in our heads. Probably not quoted accurately, forgive us, signal the institution, L as a point of view and marked our move from being to acting, or from institution to instituting. Rogoff's notion of criticality, as a move away from the more dialectic position of critique, was very important as a starting point. Imagination, by Castoriadis, that Simon Sheik then wrote in the text we commissioned him, is a very central aspect of how we position ourselves politically, not only towards institutional reflection, but as ethical political subjects in the world. Finally, a very personal understanding of Escher's radical hospitality is now at the core of what KL is, together with the notion of imagination as an actual tool, not simply a metaphor.
What are the benefits for art institutions being sustainable and structurally consistent versus being a flexible structure and temporary? Are independent art institutions weak by nature because they are bound to fluctuating economies of capital, labor, and commitment? For example, grants that can be gotten one year might not be there the next. Core participants might leave the institution, etc. Should this weakness be embraced and seen, in some sense, as the guarantor of their potential creative power, though also of their probable extinction?
We don't see those two elements as mutually exclusive. To us, it's not an either-or kind of binary. We are very suspicious of binary reasoning, and we are also very suspicious of the use of the word sustainable. Sustainability is an ecology concept that was hijacked by neoliberal thinking in order to justify, naturalize, the cuts in public investment in areas that aren't, in themselves, profitable. It posits that economical value is the only criteria for evaluation of any kind of activity. We do believe it is our mission, as an art institution, to transform economical value into cultural value through commissioning, presentation, and reflection, and that has value in itself that isn't or shouldn't be translated into economical value. Sustainability assumes that everything can be reduced to economical value, and in order to be sustainable, one has to make sure that what comes in, resources, has the same economical value of what comes out, production. In order to achieve an equilibrium, sustainability always means economical sustainability, never cultural sustainability. We disagree with that reasoning. But going back to your question, we struggle with the idea of independency. We don't know what an independent art institution is or might be. Again, we refuse that kind of binary reasoning, alternative, mainstream, independent, dependent, etc. We wish to go beyond those arguments, those binaries, because those represent the worn-out political debate that we need to bypass in order to imagine something new, something that doesn't exist yet and will, just maybe, constitute a better and more accurate response to the context in which we are living now. Having said this, on a more pragmatic level, we do try to be as flexible as possible, maybe to an extreme. Extinction is not a concern for us. Again, being social constructions, institutions don't need to be eternal. In fact, it is not a matter of need, it is a matter of fact. They are not eternal. They can last as long as their program makes sense. They can shift into something else, more meaningful, or they can pretend they are eternal entities, but fact is, they are not. And to us, that is a very important concept. KL will not last forever. Either it will end, or shift, or be passed on to someone else. Maybe it will become an eternal institution, designed by a star architect and attracting hordes of visitors. All these possibilities are valid and equally relevant for the exercise experiment we're conducting. Hopefully, if the latter happens, we will be far, far away from it.
So the image that you see is
To apply for grant money.
Called the moth, and this is depicting one of the most cheapest bathrooms in New York office at the end of the 19th century, produced by the Moth Ironworks, that is a company that later designed the pissoir that Marcel Duchamp appropriated. So it's a sort of pre-ready-made or pre-conceptual bathroom that aim to introduce to the public various forms of ideological transformation spectrum in the form of talk, storytelling. So this specific space, canvas space, is used mostly for performative art or conference. In this case, so is the guys of the Kunsthalle Lisbon who are taking account of their experience and their idea of institution on the framework of this preconceptual bathroom.
An art institution needs to give elaborate, convincing answers to questions not only about audience and metrics for success, but also about the role and mission of art within society at large. Does this put an art institution in a position opposed to their nature? If standard methods of financial support can steal the creative impulse through justifying itself to these granting agencies, should they be avoided? Or should institutions simply accept that they are hopelessly caught in a double bind and bring on professional grant writers to speak to funders in their language? Are there other effective methods of generating financial support or structuring the art institution so it can get around this problem?
First of all, we don't think an art institution has a nature. That would lead us into the debate about what an art institution naturally is. It is nothing naturally. It is a group of people working together, prescribing what behaviors can be socially accepted and reproduced. If art institutions exploit unpaid interns, that behavior becomes accepted and reproduced throughout society. It's not natural that young people have to work for free, even though it is perceived as such. Institutions prescribe behavior and perception of themselves in the world. Going back to your question, we think instrumentalization is the key word here. Everyone is instrumentalizing everyone. The system instrumentalizes us. We instrumentalize the system. There is no outside. We cannot escape this neoliberal condition. What we can do, though, is to negotiate to what extent we let ourselves be instrumentalized, how much freedom and criticality we are willing to let go in order to continue our program. In our specific case, due to the unspecialized aspects of our public funding system, the degree of freedom one has is incredibly large. So, as long as one's program is clearly articulated and relevant, one doesn't have to worry with audience numbers and educational needs. But who knows how long that situation will hold? It's the same for private funding. Maybe a sponsor will want to have a say on what your program is in order to give you money. Is that negotiable? It depends on the context, the institution, the degree of involvement the sponsor wants, etc. Again, from our experience, we now have a corporate sponsor. No involvement whatsoever, just a logo in the e-invites and being mentioned as a sponsor in all communication. That obviously means the company is instrumentalizing us for PR reasons, to provide their stockholders and society a more socially responsible image of themselves, to be acknowledged as a sponsor of the arts, and then, of course, profit from it. Are we okay with being used for that? We decided we were, because we benefit way more than the harm such an instrumentalization causes us.
What could be alternative models of structuring and building an art institution, avoiding public funding, cooperative, offering services, etc.? What would be the weaknesses and strength if considering a stronger affiliation and more structured networks between small institutions?
We still believe in a social welfare state. In such a context, the state should be responsible for funding education, justice, health and culture. That is why we pay taxes. Again, having said that, we are witnessing the collapse of the model of the welfare state. We are paying more taxes and the services the state is providing are becoming fewer and fewer. The collapse is evident, not only for art funding but for an entire social paradigm. Maybe sociability, solidarity and generosity could constitute other ways of building an institution. We are trying that now, and only the future will tell how successful we'll be.
What is missing in the art institutional landscape, locally, regionally, internationally at the moment? If we are missing institutions, what would they be? And why don't they exist?
We don't know what is missing because it doesn't exist yet. What we know, though, is that in what we have just described above are the key elements, ideas that we are using in trying to imagine an art institution otherwise.
I'm always amazed to see how the painting introduces also now physicality and embodies, in this case, ideas and a reflection. on institutional thinking. And the last project I will show you is the one that has been developed in the Dominican Republic. It's called an Ambush. And is a confusion of code about what's coming out here. When I say that we are flexible, transgender, pseudomorphosis, so shape containing another shape, well, in this case, it's impossible to define what this is exactly, because if I tell you, well, that's a painting, I'm missing the fact that it's at the same time a recreative space. As you can see, there is a person entering and using the painting for relax. At the same time, it's a smoking area, because one of the claims is that it's possible to smoke cigars inside this painting. At the same time, it's a magazine. And I will focus especially on the magazine aspect, because what was interesting to me was this possibility to regain a contractual power towards the societal spectacle, I would say, becoming myself an editor from a magazine, editor-in-chief. And that's because I had a very sad situation. The sad situation is that Lorenzo Benedetti, who is the former director of the Appeal Center, has been badly treated by the institution, because all of a sudden number and tourists was more important than cultural research, and basically lost his job from one day to the other. Most of the magazine was like being very flicky, gossiping around, but not giving a precise account of the position of the director. And so I decided to create a space for him inside my painting, where he could express his idea concerning the present and the future of art institutions. So it's not necessarily only an accuse towards the Apple, but since he faced really, since he went to court against them, the hidden aspect of the art institution, it was interesting to me ask him an account about what an art institution is or what might be, so which could be the transformative aspect of this experience. I was interested in his figure as a figure of weakness, because it was all of a sudden antagonist to a group of power who was deciding upon him. But I always hope that this moment of weakness can be also extremely fruitful in a moment in which is edited by someone else and can make grow rapture inside a system, who can reveal new possibilities. So I decided to create this magazine called Ambush. Ambush is a military term, because it means like being ambushed. But at the same time, it refers to identity in the moment in which you recall a magazine about gay, lesbian, and transgender from New Orleans from the 70s. So about, again, it was talking about the identity of the piece itself. Is it a painting, a space, a magazine? As you can see, what I wrote here is the army and confidence, and if they were caught in an ambush, the commander of course the event is an ambush, the Jaguar ambush as the big gunner. It's all on canvas, and this is the first issue, titled Cycle Institution. It opened with an editorial by Rob Gardner, a former participant of the Apple Center and renowned dealer from London. In the editorial, we described on this is not an apple of Madrid, it's taking distance from the institution of the Apple, saying that it's a rotten apple. And I commissioned after to Lorenzo Benedetti a text titled Cycle Institution, with a long essay about the present and future. And there are, of course, advertisements for spaces from Caribbean, or not only, but never had publicity because or too new, or too crazy, or too great. So we have like a South San Juan from Martinique, Sindicato, with a new group of artists from Santo Domingo. Or again, we have Monte Cristo, who is an amazing project run by two Italian artists in a desert island in Sardinia. This is only the first issue, so I intend to create more issue of this English magazine, but the focus will be always around institutional thinking. Well, I think that can be an answer. I don't know if you have any questions. Yes. See, but we are 1 hour precise, so I would like to leave space for questions. Otherwise, I can, of course, go in detail about a single project I showed you. Yes, yes. The cigar is coming from the fact that the shape of this canvas is motivated by an architecture from Italy. It's called the Door San Michele. It's an interesting building because initially it was a lodge. After it's been transformed into a church, it's been burned by a fire. And the Medici family, so the secular commission, put money to rebuild it up. And so it's been transformed into an oratory. And at the same time, a grain reserve for emergency, in case of emergency. I like it, but this space had so this sort of multiple identity. The apartment design was decorated by Lynn Flower, who of course was a corporative sign of the secular commission. And on this shape, I decided to, instead of dedicate the pattern to the Medici, to dedicate to the commission at that time was Davido Parton Liberty. I selected my favorite cigar, the one I was smoking while painting, and I painted by hand on all the canvas. I painted by hand also because I was intrigued by the visiting the public and see all this worker rolling this cigar, and for me it was interesting, you know, this repetition compulsion, not all of a sudden was in front of me, and so I somehow placed myself into the same experience of them, every day painting like a cigar, going in details, how to make it perfect, and occupying basically one entire month doing that. At the same time, the cigar was interesting because all the support for art in the Caribbean are related to, in one way or another, to cigar tobacco production. Not only Davidoff, but also Central Leone and other companies are giving money to art institutions. And that was an interesting hidden link, but all of a sudden my magazine was intending to make it evident. As well, the Hunter Gatherer, who was leaving the island before Columbus took over, was gathering into an institution, into a reef, sniffing among other products tobacco leaves during this Cohoba ritual. It was a way, a shamanic way to enter in touch with their ancestors, and they was fitting after on top of this Chemi idol. It was an idol carved on this ritual bulldog called Cohoba. It's a Mahogany from Dominican, with a sacred wood, so nowadays it's not in commerce, you can buy it. But I was able through the series of people there to have a piece of wood of copper of the same size of the one used to make the semi-idol, but I carved it into an ashtray in order to push this new relationship that tobacco established with the art producer in the island. As well as the pillow, I filled out with tobacco leaves. So it was interesting to me that the sponsor of the magazine became evident in front, but at the same time to play with the linguistic quality of this object, with the cigar. alienation and profanation. Yes, in the sense that profanation is a way to regain a pure mean. Basically means removing separation and mixing code in order to find a way to go from things from usership. I'm definitely interested in this flexibility. So using or thinking about painting in an expanded field, and that means, of course, to break order in that sense, to go for the good profanation and the attitude. I think a way out certain control that this market system intends to impose. Because, you know, all of a sudden, thanks to the painting, I was able to exhibit artists that I was considering interesting. Thanks to the painting, I was able to give voice to my friend Lorenzo Benedetti during the trial. Thanks to the painting, I was able to enter in discussion with other curators and realize their vision. So, these aspects, I think, are making my life well enriched. Well, you can't really, but sacred, somehow, I mean, this paradigm is young, so you can't come back to previous form of religiosity. But of course, what was interesting was the unity that things had during this that was time. If you think all the magic word is coming from this possible relationship that the user can establish, nominating things and placing things in a certain connection. But what was justifying this possibility was a certain idea of the macrocosm and the microcosm. Of course, more scientific word will not justify this. The aim or the claim now is separate things in order to analyze them and not consider them into a sort of, even if of course science is aiming to reach a theory of the whole, but that is still a claim that didn't produce meaningful results. Well, right now I have 4 space. No, I have three space, one more endable, means smaller, digital for 4. And their nature is different. In the first one is not possible to do sculpture because there is nothing on the floor. The second one, the tent allows to do sculpture since I create a carpet who is outside the painting, only for canvas. And the first stage is for talk, having this reference with Duchamp. The bathroom, yes, because what was interesting to me for the bathroom is that it's not an apology of Duchamp, but it's a moment to go before a certain cheated promise as well. Cheated promise as well. If you consider the different attitudes that, for example, the artists from Russia had respect artists from Paris, respect the institution, you will realize immediately how, for example, for Duchamp and the Surrealists, you have to take distance from the institution because of his compositing. While the Russian artists after the revolution of the 70s, so same time of the was aiming to through various forms of stage design to reinvent, to reintroduce life into the institution, create life, the dream of a museum run by an artist, or try to stage or reintroduce new ways to think the institution. So not to take a distance, but actually to embody it. So the bathroom claim the both possibilities. It's like something was happening just a few years before a certain decision was taken. As well as two major space, 20 meters, 26 meters, who are used for mostly museum collection, or for a very larger number of pieces. So these are, I don't produce a space kind of show. I like this use of the space and this deformation as well. Yeah. Probably use. Thank you for coming.